They're sort of famous for saying like clean code is a terrible thing. What's your problem with clean code?
I mean, the easiest way to say it is,
This is Casey Muratori. His animation system was used to build games in some of the biggest franchises spanning the past 25 years, including Baldur's Gate, Elder Scrolls, and Age of Empires. And he isn't afraid to let you know what he really thinks.
I really couldn't care less about AI. It's completely uninteresting. I just don't care.
Casey's brilliant approach to interviewing solves problems that big tech hasn't been able to figure out yet.
I can always do an interview that can tell whether someone knows a lot about programming.
This might be a mistake, but why don't you interview me right now?
Okay.
Thanks so much, Casey, for joining us in the studio today.
Well, thanks for having me, Steve.
Absolutely. So let's start with your journey. What were the main critical moments in your past that would have led to probably much different outcomes for your life had they come out in a different way?
Well, I guess probably the biggest one was like back when I was in high school. I sort of had a really unusual entry into professional programming because originally, I was just a kid at home. And this is obviously before, the internet has any penetration and stuff like that. So it's pretty isolating, actually. And I just programmed at home like any kid would in that generation. But there happened to be a person who lived in the same town as I did, who ended up going off to work at Microsoft. And he basically said, if you want to try coming out to intern for the summer at Microsoft, because we have an intern program there, that'd be cool with us. I'd set up for it because he had some clout there. Normally they wouldn't, they wouldn't take some high school kid. And so I was like, this sounds awesome. I have no idea really what that means. I don't really know anything about Microsoft. I mean, obviously I know sort of roughly what they do, but again, no internet means you just don't have much connection to it. And so getting to go out and do that was it definitely totally changed what I was going to do later in life because I met people there. And then instead of going to college, I came out here to work with people who I'd met at Microsoft. That was just blind luck, right? I mean, there was no way for me to manifest that outcome. It's just I had to end up happenstance living in that town and meeting that person. So that was literally just complete luck. And I would say that I would have just gone to college if it weren't for that. There wouldn't have been another option for me, I don't think.
You were already into computers when you met up with this older person that brought you back over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I used to program all the time. I learned to program when I was very little because my father was a programmer. He worked at a company, again, right in line with that thing I was saying about that shift. He worked at a company called Digital Equipment Corporation. Yeah. Obviously, they're very famous if you know computer history, but they don't even exist anymore, right? They got absorbed into, part of them got absorbed into Intel, part into Compaq, and so on. They're the ones who came and did Windows NT, which is the kernel we now use today. So very storied company. My dad worked for that company. And so he was a programmer and he taught me to program. So I learned much younger than you might if you were just a random kid, right? So that was really why I knew anything about programming in the first place, yeah.
And so your father was a programmer and you probably would have gone to college were it not for this internship. How old were you when you were on this internship? Did they fly you out to Seattle area to register?
Yeah. It would have been between maybe my junior and senior years of high school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what did you work on as an intern?
As poorly behaved as I am these days, I was even more poorly behaved then, right? Because I'm a little kid. You don't know anything. I've never been in a workplace environment, so I don't really know what was going on. I really could have used a stern hand, someone who just keeps me in line, tells me this is how we do things, do it, whatever. And unfortunately for me, the exact opposite thing happened. So right before I get there, and for those of you who don't know how Microsoft used to do internships, usually you come in a block. So me and 3 other interns or something, right, will come and we will be given to some person there who's going to kind of manage what we do, right? That was how it worked at the time. I don't know how it works now, probably differently. When I got there, the person who was supposed to give us something to do wasn't there. So what ended up happening is there's this other guy, he had come from BBT and he worked at Microsoft and he was just going to give us something to do. Just basically because they didn't know what else to do. Just all right, hey man, could you just give these interns something to do? So the first thing he had me do is just go write this. Could you write a library that loads ANI files? ANI files are what they use for animated cursors in Windows back in the day. I don't even know. This is probably still supported because Windows, back compat, but the ANI files, they were just an animation format. And he was thinking they could use that to do some kind of animation. I don't know. the division was a mess. That no one had a good plan for anything. So they were just trying to come up with something. So I went and wrote that, but that didn't take very long. It's pretty simple. It's not a very hard thing to do, even for my skill level at the time.
This is where like the cursor goes from like a pointer to a what is the
Walking dinosaur, for example, or the sand. Yep.
Or what is that called?
Hourglass.
The hourglass, and the hourglass is like flipping over,
Yes.
and that's the. So it's just like a bunch of pixel masking and a couple of colors. And
I mean, it's really basic, yeah, and it's from the old days. So I want to say that it's like an indexed palette. It's not real RGB. And later, I think they did add, they expanded this to take care of it. But back in, I think when he asked me to do it, I don't even think the file format supported things like 8-bit color. It was or 8-bit per channel. It was more like 8-bit palletized, or maybe even less, maybe 4-bit palletized. It was very simple. So I made a thing that did that. And then they're like, I don't know what else we're going to do. Point being, it was just chaos, and nothing really much happened over the course of that summer.
super interesting. No, I think Microsoft.
It's not that interesting, but thank you.
It's interesting to me because I know Microsoft has different eras, and I think that era in the 90s was one where there were still a bunch of personalities and people just kind of doing their own thing and lots of tempers. And I think around early 2000, the turn of the millennium, it turned much more corporate than it was.
I think you're probably right about that.
Okay, so we have like 16, 17-year-old Casey. Like, and then what happens? Like you come back from Redmond on the West Coast, and like, what's the next thing that happened in your life?
So then, while I was there, obviously, I got to know Chris Hecker. Basically, like because they were working on WinG, and they were trying to ship it. One of the things that you got in that era, and again, this may sound strange to people. This may sound strange to people at home who are used to like, well, don't you just always have free food, right? Microsoft at that time, you had free drinks and all that sort of stuff, but there wasn't free food. The cafeterias were subsidized, but there wasn't free food unless you were shipping. If you were in like a crunch period or something like that, because they knew people might be staying late, catered food would be brought in. So in conference rooms, if you're just walking around late at night, there'd be just like those metal catering trays. Mm-hmm. And you could smell it. Like if you're in your office, you'd smell something like, oh, that smells like something pretty good, right? And you follow it. So I got to know them because I would stay late sometimes. I didn't have much I could do, so I was always there. I'd just kind of go hang around at work or whatever. So at night, I went in one time, I was like, hey, what are you guys doing in here? And like, oh, do you want some food? And they gave me some. So that's how I got to know Chris Hecker. And I got to know John Blossom, who's another guy who was there, and John Ross, who's another guy who was there. I got to know some of these people. They ended up starting a company out here to do game stuff called Definition 6. Nothing ever came of it. But when I went back home, I was like so happy to be like with programmers out here because it was just such an interesting experience to me that I was like, I just want to go do that. Like whatever's going on, I want to go do that. So instead of going to college, they were starting a company to do that. I was like, can I come? Right? And they were like, sure. So that was what I did first when I went out to the industry. And then from there, I just ended up getting real jobs after that because they had a lot of connections and they would vouch for me being okay, right? He doesn't totally suck, so hire him. And so from there, that's actually how I eventually got a job at Rad Game Tools, which is where I did most of the work in the game industry that shipped, right? Like most of the thing that's actually in products was there.
This episode is brought to you by Linear. Let's be honest. The issue tracker that you're using today isn't very good. The only thing worse than fixing the issue itself is fighting with the software that tracks it. Linear is different. It's incredibly fast, well-designed, and purpose-built for modern software development. Engineers like me love the keyboard shortcuts. It gives me Vim-like vibes, direct integrations with modern and ubiquitous tools like GitHub, and built-in project updates that keep everyone in sync. That way, you don't update your issue and then immediately go to Slack to ping the right people. That's just using Slack for issue tracking, but with more steps. Linear is the default choice for engineers at some of the most well-known and fastest-moving companies in the world, like OpenAI, Vercel, and Perplexity. Modern projects deserve modern issue tracking that works seamlessly for companies small, big, and gigantic. I personally love Linear because I resonate with their values. You have to trust issue tracking software from people that have a zero bug policy on the software that they sell to other people. Seriously, no bugs. Whether you're using it at work already or perhaps wanting to test it out on that side gig,
Head to linear.app/ALE to learn more.
I'll also drop the link in the description. Thanks again to Linear for sponsoring today's conversation.
That's amazing. It's just like, how does a 16, 17-year-old rub elbows with the right people that allow
Total randomness.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, it's like, I don't know if this is survivorship bias or whatever, but, you know, Bill Gates grew up in the area. Somehow he was around a computer, probably
Right.
before your time. He was, to make the basic compiler and all of that lore that goes on at the beginning of Microsoft. He's a teenager. He's like writing software like for like businesses. And so it's like, I wonder if it's like, okay, well, the people that are lucky that are sort of exposed to this stuff early are the ones that go up to succeed, or is there something about, a particular type of person that like manifests this out into the universe?
I mean, I think it's a two-sided thing in a large extent. There's probably some people, and I am not included in this group, who are like so good that they will just manifest. But I wasn't. Like, I mean, some people like, they just write some amazing game when they're 16 or something. Like that happened to some people back in that era. They were just like that good. And I wasn't. So I think for anyone who's not in that more select group of people that's very small, it's really a two-sided thing. You have to be like hardworking and show that you do this stuff a lot so that someone might believe that we should give this kid a chance. But then it also takes like the other side, like the people who are older, to look and go like, I want to give this kid a chance, right? And so I think for anyone who's not in that super exclusive niche, it's really a two-sided thing. And unfortunately, that does mean that there's a fair bit of luck involved. You have to happen to cross paths with somebody in that way. But I've kind of like, at least in my own life, I've tried to internalize that as much as possible. And so I am always trying to help people. When I see people like out there, younger people who are doing cool stuff, and I think they really have a passion for programming, I always send them to my friends who are hiring. I'm like, you should take a look at this kid. You should take a look at this kid, right? Because literally just trying to pay it back. Because I'm like, if no one had done that for me, then it wouldn't have happened.
Let's talk about some advice that you might give somebody that's 16, 17, or maybe a little older than that, or maybe a career changer. Like, should they do a boot camp? Should they try to self-study? Should they go to college?
Right.
If that's open to them, should they go back to college to get that computer science degree? Like, how should you proceed?
Man, I just don't know. This is why I say, like, I try to do the other half of the two-half thing that I was talking about, which is to say that if someone out there has found the fact that they love this and is doing it, I want to try and find them and help them. So I do think, like, as stupid as it sounds, I think the only real advice you can give someone is that if you really are passionate about the thing that you're doing, then you just kind of have to believe that if you remain pleasant, easy to talk to, be not, don't do things that might put off the kinds of people who are looking to see if they can give someone a chance. And then just try to let that passion speak for itself any way you can. Put things up, have a stream where you do stuff, try to participate in things so that you can be seen, because we don't have a way to find you otherwise, right?
The idea that there is a lotto that's going on that's not completely random, where you can increase your surface area, I think that surface area has never been larger today. You can stream. You can literally you don't have to ask anybody permission to do a thing. You can just go and do it. And the wonderful thing about today's day and age, even I think in very poverty-stricken parts of the world, you have access to a computer. At the very least, you have access to a phone. There are billions and billions of phones out there. Or if you have a computer or some sort of laptop, you can tinker. Like, you can go and download all of these free tools. The knowledge is out there. You have access to YouTube. You have access to all of these resources that didn't exist way back when, and they're all free. If you have something that's driving you, like, pick a thing up, let the curiosity drive you, let the, whatever your motivation is drive you. You can just go and do a thing to try to get noticed.
I mean, to extend the metaphor that you used, you won't win the lotto if you don't play the lotto. And playing the lotto is when people are looking, they look at you, because they might at some point, they have to see someone with promise, right? Yeah. So what you don't want to do is have there be a chance encounter with someone, a chance thing that you go to, someone happens to drop by your stream, whatever it is. You don't want that to happen and you to not look like you're a person who's passionate about this, who deserves a chance at this and whatever, if you're going for that, right? And like, I guess, if you're saying that sort of the overarching idea of this podcast is exceptional careers, then yeah, it's like you're talking about exceptional career. You have to show that you're somewhat exceptional. You don't have to be the best in the world, right? But you have to show us like, oh, this person, they care a little more about this than most people. That goes a long way. I
get a lot of questions like on my Discord. They're like, hey, Steve, I just landed an internship. How can I, impress them so they get a return offer, or, maybe I can intern them again, just to make sure that they're making the most of the opportunity. And my answer is just like, you have somebody's attention right now. And so like, don't squander it. Like, I came from Amazon and we hired hundreds of these interns and they descend upon Seattle. We don't know where to house them anymore. And, they finally have a little bit of money because we give them a generous salary and a stipend, and they're probably away from home for the first time ever, outside of college. And, they're in a new city and there's all these other young people there. And it's like, you could go and party, or you can make the most of the attention that you get by default.
Right.
And so like, why wouldn't you just like make use of that attention that you have to impress people, so that, it's basically, I don't know which division you're going to be put into. I don't know what product you'll be working on. I don't know what the tech stack is going to be. But literally, can you apply yourself in a way that is impressive to, the people? It doesn't, and it can just be impressive in the way you know how to be impressive. It doesn't have to be a very specific type of like, oh, I go super deep on things, or, I'm really good at presenting all of my work, or whatever it is. Just like the thing that makes you, just be really impressive in that while you have the attention of another person.
Well, and I don't have a lot of experience in corporate environments, so like I don't really even know how to speak to a question like that, right? Like you've had a lot of experience of like, what does that look like? But I can say on the flip side of things, so when you're just talking about like, if an experienced programmer who cares a lot about programming is going to interact with you, right? They just want to see that you care about the code, man. You can see it a mile away. I was having this discussion with someone privately, so I won't say who, but I was having this discussion with someone actually very recently, because they were asking about something, and I basically said like, it was kind of like, why did I think that, I kind of thought this person was good. And they're like, why? You're like, how or how'd you know that? I was like, I remember like all of the things that happen when someone's talking about code. I'm like, did they notice this? Did they notice that? Or they seem to really be hung up on this thing because they didn't think it had a good explanation. All those sorts of things. And like, in my head, I'm like, I can tell that this person's brain is the kind of brain that really wants this code to work and work well. And they're not satisfied. They're not just satisfied when like the thing, got whatever the check mark was that it needs to pass in a code review. Like, that's not what they're about. They're about like, is this code actually good? And do I actually understand how it works for real? At least for me, I can smell that a mile away. And when I see someone like that, because it's so rare, like most people are just like, I don't know, I just wanted to get the thing done, right? Or I wanted to impress someone, right? Yeah. I can smell a mile away the person who's actually like, no, I'm in it, right? And so at least for me, that's the thing. It's like I can tell when a programmer's got that, and they might not be that good yet, but I'm like, I know they've got a pretty good shot of being good one day if that's the way they are, because they're going to have that feedback loop of never letting it slide. And when you never let it slide, you just get better and better and better, because you learn and you dig in. You don't let your brain like lie about whether you got it or not. So anyway.
At Amazon, we call that particular leadership principle ownership.
Okay.
And so the way that Amazon sort of gives you the carrot is they're like, here's a bunch of equity. You are now an owner of the company. Do you embody ownership? Do you care? Basically this thing, like, do you care about what's going on right now?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're talking about, which is just like when it comes to the code or wherever you're working on, do you care about it? Like, the things that you don't maintain, you don't really care about. You might make lip service to it, but if you actually cared about it, you would seal your deck, once every 2 years or whatever you're supposed to, right? And then there's all this deferred maintenance. And so I think ultimately, if you care about something, somebody will notice. And it doesn't almost like matter what it is. I love nerds. And not just nerds that are tech nerds. My definition of nerdiness is basically like you like something so much that you don't care what other people think about you. That could be a video game, that could be a movie or anime or a manga, or it could be woodworking or music or whatever it is. But you're a nerd because you just want to know what's going on here and you care deeply about it and you care about your perception of yourself. And so I think ultimately you want somebody that's nerding out that cares about the code. So let's talk about it. So you've I think only in your career really only worked on small teams. Is that correct? Is that a fair characterization?
It's not entirely true because I did work on, I consulted when I was consulting for RAD. I did work on the Larrabee project, which was quite large. This was a project with Intel. So that entire structure was very big. But in general, my philosophy towards developing stuff is I've just always found that small teams are the ones who are the most productive. So I've always tried to organize myself around working on that. I do think I can appreciate the challenge of I'm going to try and run a 1,000-person org and try to get it to do something, right? Because it's a whole other ballgame, right? Of like trying to figure out how you're going to have that many people actually do something useful together. So I appreciate it. I just think I'm not that interested in it. So I've always just kind of left that. I'm like, there's plenty of people who want to do that, as far as I can tell, there are anyway, and they will do that. But I've never really wanted to do that, and so I've always kind of tried to keep myself on things where I was pretty direct.
Let's talk about the code layer a little bit.
Okay.
You're sort of famous for sort of saying like clean code is a terrible thing. And I guess my question is like, what's your problem with clean code? What's your problem with indirection and vtables and runtime execution? Like, what's the big thing there that rubs you the wrong way? Because it seems like you're okay with some amount of it.
Oh, I'm okay with
CPU layer.
Yeah, sure. I'm okay with all sorts of things. I mean, I want things to run well. I mean, the easiest way to say it is I want good software. To the extent that we can figure out how to do it, that's what I want. So clean code, I think it's important to make a distinction because this always comes up. So some people just think clean code is whatever they like. And I can't argue against that because I may like it too, right? Whatever it is that you think of as clean code might be something that I also think is good code, right? When I talk about, or when I was talking about clean code in sort of that particular viral video, as it turned out, right? That was like part of a course that I do, this one of the things in it. And I put it in quotes, clean code, and that was because there are certain canonicalizations that people have done where they're like, here are my things that I think you should do. And some of those are pretty misguided, in my opinion. And the reason is because when I think about what is necessary to approach a programming problem, at a minimum, you have to be aware of how what you are writing will be executed on the CPU. Because it's actually very easy these days, unfortunately, I wish this wasn't the case, but it's very easy these days to make a few bad decisions and have a few bad habits that end up making your software run horribly slowly. And again, I wish that wasn't the case. I wish you had to work harder to make, right? Like I wish you had to make more mistakes, but it's like we have these cliffs in performance, unfortunately, and it's unfortunately pretty easy to fall off of one. And so for the clean code stuff, that particular video was just talking about there's this certain thing that happens that's very unfortunate that a lot of people don't understand. And that is that if you're using what would be called runtime dispatch, so something where the compiler, for example, doesn't know exactly what it's going to be doing at that time, So it has to use some kind of indirected, it's going to be an indirected branch in the CPU. People don't realize just how bad this can get. And unfortunately, some people think that it's just about the cost of a virtual function, but that's not actually true, because virtual functions are actually relatively free at just the code flow level, because the front end, if it can predict a virtual function branch, then it just kind of does it. You don't have to pay a cost there. The real cost of virtual functions are unfortunately that a lot of people, and this is why I showed in the clean code thing, they're write small functions, prefer polymorphism and dynamic dispatch and late binding and all these things. When you add those together, what you get is something that the compiler can't look at and optimize. Because you're doing all these things, calling all these very little methods, very small things like virtual gets and sets and things like this. And what they do is they atomize the code up such that the compiler can't look at that whole thing and go, oh, this gigantic stack was just, I add 2 to this variable, right? Which is which if it was static dispatch, if it didn't have those virtualizations, those unknown types in between it, it could have just done. And so what I kind of was trying to get across in that video, and because it's part of a course where I teach all these things, what I was trying to get across in that video was that. And unfortunately, a lot of people just think I want your code to be sloppy, which, it's my fault because I should have made a longer video, I guess, right? And someday maybe I will. But what I kind of wanted people to understand was that actually, you really do need the compiler to collapse these giant paths for you, because all these little micro things, they make it impossible for the compiler to do that because it doesn't know what type is ahead of time. If instead you can shift your thinking to static dispatch, the compiler's always going to know what the type is. All of a sudden, that same function that might have been a disaster before is fine now, right? Especially if it's in a loop and so on and so forth, right? And so there's these small shifts in thinking that you can have, and I want programmers to be aware of those, because they don't necessarily have to do a tremendous amount more work. They just have to know the difference between those. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, maybe we can take the conversation over to hiring, which is, obviously I was asking.
That's your strong suit. I'm not going to have much to add here.
Well, no, I just, if you look at the numbers, I had a bar raiser that I used to work with that sort of helped me out as I was becoming a bar raiser. He said, the numbers aren't good in terms of good interviewers versus bad interviewers. Basically, everybody's done these sort of analyses, but they don't really expose the results. But ultimately, the person that I'm referring to, I won't name him, he's since retired. Anyways, he said that the best interviewers were better pickers by 30%. Something on that order, but
nothing, but
yeah, there was something that was measurable that was there, but there were a bunch of folks that they let through that probably shouldn't have been let through, and then they probably said no to folks. Obviously, you have to talk about type 1 and type 2 errors. And then they said that the worst interviewers were worse than random chance.
Okay, so if you had just flipped a coin, hire, no hire, that would have been better than having this person's input.
The worst interviewers.
Okay.
Yeah. But flipping the coin would not be better than the best.
Right.
And so you were just talking about these marginal, gains and stuff like that, sort of centered around this coin flip. And so we have nobody, Google or Amazon or whoever, Meta, whoever we're talking about, nobody's nailed the interview process.
I see.
I don't think. But I would just love to ask you, if you could wave a wand and say, okay, well, this is the way that the default hiring is, what would that look like?
So here is what I have been asked this before, and my answer never really changes, but you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt because, like I said, this is not my wheelhouse. I think that I can always do an interview that can tell whether someone knows a lot about programming. I do not think there is any way to tell whether they will be productive. So, split into 2 things. The productive side, I have no idea because it's so important. You can tell just by the interview whether people have been productive in the past, but knowing if they will be productive at your company or if they've stopped really being productive, I don't know how you do it, right? Look and see how much stuff they've done. I don't know. That part seems almost impossible. The part that I think that I do know how to do is the interview process for, is this person really know what they're doing with programming? And the way that I like to do that comes from someone who's already been mentioned, and that's Chris Hecker. He's the one who taught me how to do this, and he is extraordinarily good at it, and I just do exactly what he did. And that is, it's a drill down interview. You basically talk with the person for a while, and you obviously are aware of their CV because you've been handed it. You narrow in on something of your choosing so that they don't really have the ability to pick it. You narrow in on something of their choosing that they have worked on before. And you go all the way down to a literal implementation detail. And you make them teach you that thing. And I've never seen this fail. Not even one time. And the reason for that is because if you really are good, you can always do that. And if you're not, you really kind of can't because you don't know. So I feel like that's a very good interview process for determining, does this person understand programming? The other part is just like, I don't know. And I don't know if it's solvable. So I think that's part of that 30% thing. It's like, I think maybe the good interviewers can do that, but can they tell if this person will work well and get stuff done for you? I don't know.
Yeah. So there's the way that we were trained to do it, and I have trained other people to do it, is there's the functional and the non-functional parts of the interview. So the functional parts of the interview as it exists today are a bunch of coding questions that have no, congruence to anything that you would do day to day.
That just seems bad. Yeah, I don't like those.
There's the Leetcodes,
no.
reverse a link lists, and with constant space and linear time, or, invert a binary tree, whatever it is. Yep. You don't do any of that stuff day to day. And then there's a system design thing, which again they call it the system design interview. Does not resemble system design in the slightest. We don't talk to randos for 30 minutes.
Okay.
To design the Twitter feed or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
That takes a lot more effort, and the details matter, and there's a ton of people that we're going to need to coordinate. It's not, here's my box for the database of every tweet, and then this is how we'll create a feed. And so that's how we would do. So on the functional side, it sounds like actually let's just probe and dive deep and see if they can teach you something that you didn't know about a specific
even if I do already know. So I'm acting dumb in this. I mean, you're not intentionally, you're not trying to mislead them, but you're not going to volunteer answers to things, right? You're going to make them do it. But so there's a couple of reasons for this. One is that a person needs to feel comfortable in an interview discussing a technical topic with you. Mm-hmm. If you just go in there and you say reverse a linked list, it's like, well, okay, I mean, either they've practiced that before, mm-hmm. in which case they will feel comfortable, but it doesn't help me because it's just something they practiced, or they've never really thought about that particularly hard, and it's just catching them off guard, and they're just like, oh, okay, I guess I do this or whatever. If you focus on something the person has done, mm-hmm. it's coming from a place of comfort already. They should understand this code. And if for some reason they don't, if this code that they worked on, that they wrote, and they don't understand it, that's already very good information to me that this is probably not somebody, right? I can tell you about code that I wrote 30 years ago even. I might not get it exactly right, but I remember all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And that's pretty important for good coders. They should know how they did a thing. And so what you're trying to do is put them on their own sure footing.
Yeah.
And say, from a place of confidence where you wrote the code and you were in control, what did you do? Walk me through it. And then I'll throw you some curveballs in there. You'll be like, oh, what if we had to do that in 30 milliseconds or whatever? What if we couldn't have had that one through there, and see how they respond? Again, because now they're in a place where they have a solid foundation, and they're coming at the problem in the same way that they really will at your company. Because fundamentally speaking, when they're actually working, they're not going to be asked to just show up and solve some completely unrelated problem they haven't been thinking about at all,
Exactly.
Right? And so that I find works really well. And I find that you can really quickly tell if someone's good or not using that process. And so far, like I said, I have not really ever seen that be a problem. It only gets you that one. It only gets you that one piece of knowledge, though. It's, okay, will this person are they a competent programmer? And that is the only thing you get. And how you get the rest of it.
So, I may regret this.
Okay.
But do the interview that we random walk down with me.
Okay. So since I don't have your CV and I don't know, what are some, tell me a little bit about some of the code that you personally have written in your career, that you worked on, not that you managed someone to work on.
Okay. I think the last one was when I worked at Amazon Tickets. So we were basically, it's like a Ticketmaster clone.
Oh, okay.
And so, but we didn't operate in the U.S. We had plans to move it to the U.S., but we were operating in Europe.
Okay.
Yeah. So the ordering system, refunds, the back end, basically, right?
You were working on the back end.
Yes.
Okay.
That was the last meaty code thing. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this back end. Like, what does it entail? It's got to handle like tickets, and is it serving web stuff, or is it serving like what's the basics? Right?
Yeah, there's a web and a mobile app, but basically the idea is that so there's two types of on sales for tickets. There's like a show for a musical that might not sell out, or there Justin Bieber or Taylor Swift or something like that. There's a very big demand for the tickets, and so those were our high velocity on sales, and so those we would advertise, hey, tickets go on sale at 9 a.m. BST or something like that, and so the highest amount of traffic would occur at T0.
Okay.
Thing about tickets is, for general admission, you might just be able to do a counter, hey, how many GA tickets do I have? But for the most part, there's seated arrangements. You get seat A, B, C, and D, and you can't double sell.
Correct.
If I sell, and unlike the airline industry,
I
can't overbook the stuff. And when that did happen, it was just a sort of operational nightmare.
Okay, so what part of that code were you working on? So did you have to write like what language is this in? How much of a back end are you writing for that part, the part that's actually processing these tickets?
Yeah, it was in Java. We decompose things into web services, so by different responsibilities, and so there's an ordering system.
Okay.
The ordering service, obviously it has different components associated with, but the ordering system.
Walk me through kind of like roughly how that was structured, this Java program that's handling these tickets.
Yeah, so basically it's all through web APIs. So for these big on sales, you have this two-stage purchasing. So if you've ever bought a ticket for something.
I have.
You go in and you make a request, and then there's like, okay, well, here's the tickets that we have for you. You have 15 minutes to go and check out.
Okay.
And so you have the right of first refusal there. So basically it would be some sort of like search. We called it encumber. So you would search and encumber these tickets.
Okay.
And then you had a lock on them, basically.
Okay.
And then there's a timer in the background. And if that timer expired, then you either had to have purchased at that time or it'd go back into the pool.
So when you did this sort of search and encumber kind of thing, so incoming to this is what? This is like an HTTPS of some kind.
Yeah.
Someone's pushing something in, like they're posting or what is it? A sort of REST API? Like what? I don't know. What is that?
It is. It's essentially is a REST API, but you have a handle to a customer object.
How does that happen?
So in the background, it would intercept the request and say, oh, there's a customer ID here. And so then it would go and dispatch to the customer service, the equivalent of a customer service, and then rehydrate a customer in there. And so when you're processing all of this information, you have a Java customer.
Okay, so you see everything I did there, right?
Yeah.
Now that is the easy version. Because I didn't want this to take the full hour of an interview, right?
I could go deeper, but yeah.
The hard version would have been, I would have gone for the making you walk me through the entire system of how you did the ticket. So you have multiple machines and the tickets need to be locked, right?
Yep.
And so you can kind of see how this works, right? It's like, could someone know so much about a random thing that I was going to ask them and explain all that to me? Maybe, right? Maybe after they watch this, they'll all be correct, right? But in reality, most of the time when you do that, you can tell right away, like people, like if they can keep going down and I can keep going right and keep poking and poking and poking, you're like, okay, this person's obviously competent enough to be a programmer on this thing that we're working on. And unless you have some crazy requirement of what constitutes a programmer, in which case now I'm gonna have to ask about assembly language. Unless you have some crazy requirements that we need to verify. So like, you kind of can tell because the answer wouldn't have come out like that if the person didn't really know what was going on.
Did I pass your mini interview?
Yeah, okay. Right. You should have felt that you did.
Yeah.
Did you not?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there wasn't a question that you asked that I couldn't answer.
Exactly, and you want to, and so like I said, there's it would have to, if I actually want to interview, it would be much harder because I would want to go into much more technical thing than that.
Yeah.
But it's really just that, and again. hopefully at no point during there were you starting to panic about some crazy problem that I asked you that came out of left field, right? But that's what would happen if I was just like, tell me about this thing, like, let's talk about 3SAT or something, right? It's like, well, okay, I mean, maybe you know about that, maybe you don't.
I was hoping that you were going to go towards the ticket side because there's this problem called fragmentation where you leave stranded seats that are there that are unsellable because nobody wants to go to a concert on their own. And so,
oh, right, like the two people got them on either side. There's like the thing in the middle.
So but people also want contiguous seats. And so I did a bunch of research, and it turns out it's very similar to malloc.
Okay.
Where you're, which is the way that you sort of like allocate memory, allocate RAM or whatever in C and other languages. And turns out that's not a solved problem. It depends on like how many times people are asking for memory, and then at what sizes are they going to be generally the same size versus like really big allocations and small allocations, and so like
it's a fragmentation problem, right?
Yeah.
You're fragmenting the seat space. So anyway, that's basically how it works. And just imagine the much harder version of that where you take a whole hour, right?
Yeah.
And I have always found that to be very reliable. And obviously, in this particular case, there's also a problem that I would have interviewing you, which is I don't do that kind of system work.
Yep.
So I'm not like, if I did, I would probably have also in my head, because I'm sure you can think of this now that you just saw what was happening there. You have in your head like, I know some things about those kinds of systems, and I'm going to move them sort of towards those things I want to see if they know, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have anything like that with the ticketing system because I don't work on those. So I'm just kind of going opportunistically like, oh, that sounded interesting. Let's go there. And it still kind of works, but it works better if you, and you always presumably would be interviewing someone in the similar discipline. Like you're probably hiring someone for games. If you're in games, you're not like, oh, I'm a game developer and I'm talking to someone who does distributed systems. It's like, but anyway, so hopefully that makes sense.
No, that's super good. And there's the second part of the interview, which you framed as productivity, which is...
That's hard, and I just don't know.
Are they going to be successful in the role that's there?
And that's interpersonal too, right? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and Amazon takes a very specific approach, which I think that other companies are starting to adopt, which is to really lean into behavioral questions, which is, tell me about a time when you, had to deal with a tough deadline. Well, we asked that question because we want to know, how they would, whether they have a story there. But ultimately, we have a bunch of deadlines.
Gotcha.
And so,
I can answer that question. I freak out.
Well, there's useful freak out, and then there's not so useful freak out. But I mean, at software, deadlines and software, they go hand in hand.
Yes.
And unlike investing, we really index on past performance, right? As an indicator of future performance.
Gotcha.
So let's move to rapid fire questions. So what's something that you just wish people would stop talking about? It's just everybody is talking about it and just stop, please.
Gosh, I don't know. I'm sorry. I wish I had an answer for you. There are things that I don't care about. Like I really couldn't care less about AI. But I'm not mad that people are talking about it. I mean, it's emerging technology. So I'm sorry I don't have a good answer for that one. I don't know.
That's a pretty hot take. Like, you think AI is overvalued right now?
I think it's overvalued necessarily. I don't care. Right. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, yeah, and also I don't have to care. Like there's so much money and so much attention being paid to it. I don't need to care. If there's something's going to happen, it's going to happen. It doesn't need me. Right. So I just kind of, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's happening. And so I just tend to not pay much attention to it. But I don't mind that people are talking about it.
So to step back a little bit, obviously this AI stuff is happening. If it was just, we could chat with it and it sounded like a human, that would be one thing. But these big companies with these big frontier models have trained their sites on coding as the domain that they really want to optimize these models for, that they're building tools and platforms and features around. And so, doesn't that, aren't you a bit curious about what that effect will be on your day-to-day?
I mean, being old, I don't think that hard about what my job prospects are because, I mean, honestly, I don't know how long I have job prospects for. We're separate from AI, right? So that's kind of a separate issue. I could understand why someone who is 20 is looking at guys like, gosh, I don't know, what will the jobs be? Will there be jobs in coding? Will that be a thing? So, as far as that's concerned, it's like, nah, I don't think about it that much. But in terms of like thinking of it, maybe like if the gist of the question was like, do you want to see how it works or use it for something? No, because in general, I like programming. I don't really want someone to do it for me. So if it turned out that it was something like, oh, like we don't pay people to program anymore because computers are doing the programming, maybe n iterations down the line, the coding generation is good enough. Right now, it's not good in my opinion, but let's say it gets good enough at some point. I just be like, okay, then coding's my hobby. Like I can't make a living at it, or maybe I'm already retired, so it would already be my hobby. I don't know. But that's my attitude on it.
So it's basically like, okay, well, I don't need a job, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but like I said, if I was getting into the industry now, I definitely would consider like, oh, should I have a backup plan? Should I maybe, should I get a law degree or whatever that, what I think is something that probably has a protectionist, like law degrees, doctors, like things that have a protectionist industry where they won't let the LLMs do stuff, right?
Yeah.
Should I get a degree like that because programming is going to be a hobby? It's not going to be a career. Totally valid question that I would encourage everyone to think about because we don't know, right? We have no idea how good these things will get. That's the nature of emerging technology. We can't predict it.
No, I think, what if it was doing something interesting? What if it could come up with a new algorithm that would help out with computer graphics? Or what if it could one-shot like Quake 2? And so you're like, hey, I would like Quake 2, but instead, it was filled with ducks, and I was shooting water cannons at them or something like that. And it just did that at that high of a quality. Like, would that maybe pique your interests?
No. I mean, anyone who knows me knows, like, I'm not a game designer, right? I don't need to know what Quake looks like with ducks. My interest in Quake is how did the texture mapper work, right? I mean, I know how the texture mapper works. My interest in it is that, so what I want to do is I want to get into that code. I want to write it myself. I want to see if I would apply the same, or like if I was going to do Quake 2 today, what I would do is I'd go, oh, okay, I'm going to do the SIMD version, because it wouldn't look the same. You wouldn't use a span list nowadays. It's not appropriate match the hardware like it was back then, for example. So, I want to be doing the programming. And so if it's just serving as like a research assistant for something I didn't necessarily want to do anyway, like go double check all these things, okay. But just, I'm someone who likes to do stuff.
Okay, so the complement of that is like what's really undervalued right now that like nobody is talking about, but everybody should be?
Well, 5 years ago, I would have said performance, but I think we've actually been sort of winning that war. Like a lot of people are talking about performance now. And so I actually feel pretty good about that. So I'd had to pick something else that people aren't talking about. And I guess I don't know. If I had to say, one thing might be to stick on the topic of AI and just say, I don't feel like the current IP I would call it theft. Other people might call it whatever they want to call it. But I don't think that's a settled issue, and I think that's going to have ramifications. Like if right now you're putting code into your code base that's being spit out by an LLM, and it turns out that really what we find is that all of that was unlicensed and inappropriately used, what does that mean for that company? What does that mean for your code base? I feel like people need to be talking about the legal issues here. And right now, the attitude, I understand why companies do this, because they're just in a mad dash, and they're like, we're going to deal with the lawsuits later. I know that, I don't know for a fact because I don't know any of these people, but I know they must have had these meetings and they're just like, look, we're going to settle the lawsuits somehow. We'll go to Congress, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll pay out the money. Who knows? They've just gone, it's something we'll deal with later. We're just going to mad dash to the finish because we want to be the people who get there first, and the legal stuff will sort out later. I think the rest of us need to be talking about that a little bit because something's going to happen and there will be winners and losers of that something. And I think it's a conversation that society needs to have in a more ethical way than it is right now, which is crane with its head in the sand, or flamingo, whatever bird, ostrich. Thank you. There you go.
I completely agree. And I think it extends past code. I've made hundreds of YouTube videos, and I know for a fact that I live somewhere in this gigantic matrix, literal matrix of data that it's been trained on and pre-trained on.
The AI has digitized your face many, 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 many times into a weight matrix and trained on it. And sure.
And our newsletters,
yes.
They are out there. And I didn't say that was okay.
Yep.
And a couple of years ago when these GPTs came out, I said, okay, well, who's Steve Quinn? And they're like, I don't know who that is. And then with these latest models, I'm like, hey, who's Steve Quinn?
It knows now.
It knows exactly who I am. And I'm pretty sure it has essentially all of my writing inside of it. And I didn't let anybody do that. And, there's the other side of it. Like, AIs and LLMs are so useful. And they're so useful because they've been pre-trained and trained on all of this stuff. And their part of me is just like, but I want the good stuff, but I also don't want to be stolen from. This is tragedy of the commons thing. Like, don't steal from me, but like, okay, well, if everybody else gets out.
Well, for me, it's easy because I don't use it. So for me, there's no tragedy.
Yeah, exactly. So you're just like, it's one direction.
The point, right, is that society should get to a place where we feel like an equitable solution has been found, and a bunch of AI companies taking all the money is not really a very acceptable version of that. But that's what's happening right now, right? And so I think like the important part is that we need to get to some place that people are happy with, not just a bunch of people who took billions of dollars. That's not really a good outcome, and I feel like there could be very negative backlash from that would hurt the computing industry and AI if they're not careful, right? Because there's a lot of pie in the sky thinking about like, oh, it'll just be utopia, and the AI is like, there's a long way between here and there filled with lots of generational strife and all sorts of really bad outcomes that could happen. And we need to be taking this more seriously. And we're not. So like that needs to happen. And I don't know how to make that happen. I'm not the right political actor to make that happen, but that's my answer to your question.
Yeah, it's this asymmetry between, the openness of the internet and all of the IP that's out there, and the fact that these companies are closed but benefiting from
tremendously, right? Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, you didn't open your model up.
Nope.
You didn't tell me how it was trained.
Yep.
I said, hey, go make me a song that sounds like the Beatles. And turns out it's been trained on the Beatles. And then it makes a song that's pretty close to the Beatles. And replace Beatles with, Casey or Steve or, your dissertation that you created when you were a grad student. And you're like, wait a second, I didn't get a penny from that, but I put my blood, sweat, and tears there to make your product that you're repackaging and selling it back out there. Yeah.
Well, I think the other problem too that I think people don't appreciate, and it's and I think there's a lot of people who can't articulate it but feel it as well, is that the societal contract was between humans. I think they forget this.
Yeah.
I knew when I sent you my newsletter or whatever that I was okay with you reading that and doing what I know you would do with that. And the same was true for you. You sent me that newsletter because you knew what I would do when I read it, and you were okay with that. It was a contract between humans. And humans are different than LLMs. They aren't the same, right? And so to pretend that somehow like you put something on the internet so you were okay with it, it's like, no, we all had a certain steady state that we got to because we are humans who agreed with each other and we found this steady state together. You can't just come with a predatory LLM model and say, oh, well, you agreed to this. Like nobody agreed to that. All of our laws were based on a previous generation that was agreeing about a different set of underlying concepts. The artist who made a training course was thinking about training other individual human artists and what they were likely to do with that training. They were not thinking about what would happen if an LLM came. So you can't pretend that they consented to this. They didn't. And I think that's a really crucial thing. And again, it gets to the heart of what you were saying. I think it's the heart of what a lot of people were feeling. And so that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
It really does. It's not okay with me that it's not being addressed.
Yeah, and you have these fringe lawsuits like New York Times, and
they will bubble up.
And there's going to be a reckoning.
Yeah.
My take, as a tiny content creator, is either share some of the profits with me in an equitable way, or allow me to say I don't want my stuff to be indexed.
Yes.
And remove it from your model.
It seems like a reasonable request, right? I mean, it seems reasonable to say these things.
Yeah.
And yet, even that has not happened yet, really.
So, super interesting. We will see. And then last question, which is, if you didn't get into tech, what would your job have been? Like, what's the counterfactual here?
Probably lawyer, honestly.
Really?
I love listening to Supreme Court oral arguments.
Oh, wow.
I like arguing with people. I'm annoying. It would all work together, right? So I do think like I've always liked arguing about things on principle and things like that. And currently today, I like looking at the law. I like listening to Supreme Court stuff and reading opinions and stuff like that. So I feel like that would be something I would have done if it wasn't for tech. I don't think it would necessarily be as fulfilling because I really do like programming. So probably that. Music would have been nice, but realistically, I think I was always too scared of just how hard a career that really is to ever go into it. So I don't think, realistically, while I would have loved to have had a career in music somehow, I think that would have been a lot of fun. I don't think I ever would have made the decision. I don't think I would have had the guts. Musicians are incredibly brave people to do that. And so I don't think I had it. I don't think I had what it takes to say, I'm going to go do that for a living.
Absolutely. Like, it's certain industries, it's like, okay, if you're a top 10% programmer, your life's pretty good,
You're just set.
right?
Yeah.
If you're a top 10% musician, it's just like, ooh, and you're trying to make a living off of that?
Yeah, you've got to be like top 1% or something, or top
even more.
0.1%, right?
Yes.
It's like you have to be like someone in a very prominent orchestra or a rock star or something like that before you're making a really good living. And the road to get there is incredibly difficult. And so basically you are as talented as easily the top 10% of programmers, but society is not compensating you that way, right? We kind of talked about this a little, we touched on with the AI thing, right? It's like programming could go that way too. It could be in the future, we just don't compensate programmers because it's getting done by machines or whatever. That could be the case. We live during this era where I consider myself to have gotten lucky, where I could get a good paycheck doing something I would have done anyway, wanted to do anyway.
Awesome. Well, Casey, thanks so much for having this conversation today, and I need to have you back. I feel like we just scratched the surface.
Well, thanks so much to you. It's been a real pleasure. Anytime you want, I'll head on back.
Thank you so much.